The Lone Star Haven Motel sat like a faded memory on the side of Route 66, its neon sign flickering in the dark, a single star pulsing in shades of crimson and gold against the sprawling desert sky. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and distant creosote, stirred by a wind that whispered through the yucca like a half-forgotten song. I stood in the doorway of room 9, my cigarette glowing faintly, its ember a small defiance against the endless night. A truck rumbled past on the highway, its headlights cutting through the darkness before fading into the distance, leaving behind a low hum that settled into my bones. I exhaled, watching the smoke twist upward, blending with the constellations I'd never learned to name. My name's Sadie. I'm telling you this because some nights are like old photographs, faded, fragile, but heavy with truths you can't escape. That night was one of those. It was early August, the kind of heat that clings to you like regret, making your skin restless and your thoughts heavy. I'd been working this road for 5 years, from Oklahoma to California, each motel a fleeting refuge, each room a stage for someone else's desires. I was good at it, good at being what they wanted, good at keeping my heart locked away where no one could touch it. But that night wasn't about what I was good at. It was about him, and the way he made me face the memories I'd tried to bury. I flicked my cigarette to the gravel, crushing it under the heel of my worn boots. The motel's office light glowed dimly across the lot, where Vera, the night clerk, was probably sipping tea and reading her romance novels. I adjusted my dress, maroon, soft and worn, clinging just enough to catch the eye, and checked my phone. 10:04 p.m. He was late, but only slightly. His text had come through earlier, brief and almost careful. Room 9, 10 p.m. Keep it quiet. No name, no details, just a request that felt like it carried a hidden weight. I'd been in this game long enough to know that meant something, maybe a secret, maybe a man carrying one he couldn't share. I stepped back inside, the door creaking shut, sealing me in with the stale air and the ghosts of nights I tried to forget. Room 9 was like every other motel room on this road, peeling wallpaper with a faint arrowhead pattern, a bed that sagged like it was tired of secrets, and a lamp casting a warm, amber glow that softened the room's edges. The curtains were thin, brown, swaying slightly as the desert wind slipped through a crack in the window. The air smelled of old smoke and time, a scent that clung to everything, including me. I sat on the edge of the bed, catching my reflection in the chipped mirror across the room. My blonde hair was loose, falling in soft waves past my shoulders, and my hazel eyes stared back, sharp but weary, holding stories I'd never tell. Not even to you. I lit another cigarette, the match's flame dancing briefly before settling. The clock on the nightstand read 10:07. Waiting always stirred memories I'd rather keep buried, like dust kicked up by a passing car. I thought about my father, his voice rough from years of shouting over factory noise, telling me to be careful, to stay safe. I thought about the night I left home at 19, my bag packed with dreams of becoming a singer, of finding a stage beyond the small-town bars. I thought about my first night working this job, the way I'd stood in a motel bathroom, promising myself it was just until I could afford a guitar and a new start. That was 5 years ago, and the road had a way of making promises feel like lies. A soft knock at the door pulled me back, my heart skipping, not from fear, but from something alive, something I couldn't name. I stood, smoothing my dress, and crossed the room, my boots clicking on the linoleum. I opened the door, and there he was. He stood in the doorway, framed by the neon star's glow, his face half hidden in shadow. He was tall, lean, with a faded flannel shirt and hair the color of cedar, much like he'd been driving through the wind. His eyes were blue, deep and steady, like a lake under moonlight, carrying a weight I couldn't read. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Like he was seeing past the dress, the makeup, the walls I'd built to survive. "You're Sadie?" His voice was low, steady, with a faint roughness that spoke of long nights and longer roads. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "You're late." He glanced at the clock as he passed, his boots scuffing softly on the carpet. "Got lost in the dark. This road's tricky." I closed the door, the latch clicking, and the room felt smaller, the air thicker, like it was holding its breath. He didn't sit, just stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the neon sign as it flickered, its hum a steady pulse in the quiet. I watched him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers twitched slightly, like he was holding on to something he couldn't let go. He wasn't like the others, no easy charm, no rushed agenda, just a stillness that felt like it could shift the world. "Want a drink?" I asked, gesturing to the bottle of whiskey on the dresser. It was cheap, but it did the job, filling silences and loosening tongues. He shook his head, his eyes still on the window. "Not tonight." I sat on the bed, crossing my legs, trying to read him. He was a mystery, and mysteries were dangerous in my line of work, too many unknowns, too many ways to get hurt. I lit another cigarette, the smoke curling around me like a shield. "You got a name?" I asked, expecting him to dodge it. He turned then, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Finn," he said, the name soft but deliberate, like he'd chosen it for me. I tilted my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Finn. That real?" He smiled back, just a flicker, but it was enough to make my chest ache. "Real enough." We sat in silence for a while, the neon sign's hum blending with the distant growl of a truck on the highway. I was used to silences, but this one was different, alive, heavy with things unsaid. I watched his hands, still in his pockets, strong and steady, like they'd held something precious once and never forgotten how. I wondered what they'd touched, what they'd lost. I wondered why I cared. "You don't belong here," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a spark in the dark. I laughed, sharp and bitter, the sound echoing in the small room. "You don't know me." "I know enough." His eyes were on me now, steady, unyielding, like he could see the cracks in my armor. "This place, it's not where your story ends." I wanted to snap back, to tell him he had no right, but his words hit something deep, something I'd buried under years of motel rooms and late nights. I looked away, my throat tight, the cigarette burning low. "You don't know my story." He didn't answer, just watched me, and in that moment, I felt exposed, like he'd peeled back every layer I'd built to survive. I stood, needing to move, needing to break the spell. I walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside, the neon light painting my skin in shades of crimson and gold. The desert stretched out beyond, vast and unforgiving, and I wondered if it would ever let me go. "Why are you here, Finn?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be, barely audible over the hum of the sign. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his words were careful, like he was stepping around something fragile. "I'm looking for forgiveness. Thought I might find it here." I turned, leaning against the windowsill, studying him. "That's not an answer." He smiled again, that small, fleeting thing that made my heart stumble. "It's all I've got." We talked as the night wore on, not about the big things, not about the truths that hung between us, but about the small ones that filled the spaces. He told me about a barn in Kansas where he'd hidden as a kid, about a diner in Arizona with coffee that tasted like home. I told him about the time I'd sung at a bar in Texas, how the crowd had clapped like I was someone who mattered. We laughed, and it felt like a gift, like something I hadn't earned. His eyes softened when he looked at me, like he was seeing someone I'd forgotten how to be. Hours passed, the whiskey untouched, the bed a silent witness to a night that wasn't what I'd expected. He didn't touch me, didn't try, but every glance, every pause, felt more intimate than any touch I'd known. I found myself imagining what it would be like to reach for his hand, to feel the warmth of his skin, to ask him to stay. But I didn't. That wasn't how this worked. As dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in soft grays, he stood, pulling a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. He held it out to me, his fingers brushing mine, warm and steady, sending a shiver through me I couldn't explain. "Keep this," he said, his voice low, urgent. "Don't open it yet." I took it, my heart racing. "What's in it?" He didn't answer, just looked at me, his eyes tracing my face like he was memorizing every line. Then he turned and walked out, the door clicking shut, leaving me with the hum of the neon sign and a weight in my hand I didn't understand. I stood there, clutching the paper, my mind a storm of questions. Who was Finn? Why had he come? And what was in that note, burning against my palm like a secret I wasn't sure I could carry? The Lone Star Haven Motel faded into the haze of my memory, but that night clung to me like the scent of rain on asphalt. I carried the note in my purse, its edges softening with every day I didn't open it. I told myself I'd forget him, that he was just another shadow passing through, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his, blue, steady, haunted. I saw the way his hands stayed still, like they were afraid to reach for something they'd lost. I saw the way he looked at me, like I was more than the girl in room 9, more than the life I'd built to survive. Weeks passed, and I kept moving, motel to motel, town to town, the endless stretch of Route 66 a map of my survival. I worked, I smiled, I played the part, but it felt hollower now, like I was wearing someone else's skin. The men I met blurred together, their voices a dull hum against the memory of his. I started to wonder if I'd imagined him, if he was just a flicker of neon light, a dream born from the desert and my own longing. It was late August when I saw him again, at a motel called the Dusty Trail, just outside Barstow. The air was cooler now, sharp with the promise of fall, and the neon sign above the motel flickered in a slow, mournful rhythm, casting a soft green glow over the parking lot. I was outside, sitting on the hood of my old Ford, the metal cold against my thighs, smoking and watching the stars. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, the crunch of gravel like a heartbeat in the dark. He stepped into the light, same flannel shirt, same cedar hair falling over his eyes. He didn't look surprised to see me, like he'd known I'd be here, like the road had pulled us back together. "Sadie," he said, my name soft and heavy, like it carried a weight I couldn't see. I slid off the hood, tossing my cigarette to the ground. "Finn." He smiled, that small, fleeting thing that made my chest ache. "You remembered. You're hard to forget." The words slipped out, raw and honest, and I looked away, embarrassed, the neon light painting my cheeks in shades of green. He stepped closer, stopping just out of reach, his hands in his pockets. The light caught the lines on his face, deeper now, like the road had carved them there. "I didn't mean to find you again," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the wind. "But I'm glad I did." I laughed, unsteady and sharp. "You don't just find someone on this road. You were looking. Maybe." His eyes met mine, and I felt that same pull, that same sense of being seen, like he could see the girl I'd been before the motels, before the nights that wore me down. Maybe I was. I wanted to ask him why, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I asked, "What do you want, Finn?" He didn't answer right away, just looked at me, his eyes searching, like he was looking for something I didn't know I had. I want you to know you can forgive yourself, he said finally, gesturing at the motel, the road, the life I'd been living. I want you to believe you're more than your mistakes. I turned away, staring at the highway, the lights of a passing truck blurring into streaks. You don't get to decide what I'm worth. I'm not deciding. His voice was closer now, and I realized he'd moved, standing just behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. I'm just telling you what I see. I turned to face him, my heart pounding, and for a moment, we were all there was, the neon sign, the desert wind, the space between us alive with something I couldn't name. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge that gap, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled the note from my purse, holding it up. What's this, Finn? Why'd you give it to me? He looked at the note, his expression unreadable. It's a chance, he said. But you have to choose to take it. I laughed, bitter and raw. You don't know what I'm ready for. He stepped closer, his hand brushing mine, just for a second, and it was like a spark in the dark, lighting up every nerve in my body. I know you're carrying something heavy, he said softly. So am I. Before I could respond, he pulled another piece of paper from his pocket, this one smaller, folded tightly. He pressed it into my hand, his fingers lingering against mine, warm and steady. Read this one first, he said. Then decide what to do with the other. I looked down at the paper, my heart racing. What's in it? Forgiveness, he said simply, and then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot, leaving me with 2 pieces of paper and 1,000 questions. I stood there, the papers heavy in my hands, the neon sign buzzing above me. I didn't open them, not yet. I was afraid, not of him, but of what he represented. A chance, maybe, to let go of the guilt I'd carried for years. I sat on the hood of my Ford again, lighting another cigarette, the stars watching me like they knew something I didn't. The road stretched out before me, endless and uncertain, and I wondered if I'd ever find the courage to follow it. The dusty trail motel was behind me now, but the papers stayed with me, tucked in my purse like secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. I drove west, the road unfolding under my tires, the neon signs blurring into memories. I couldn't shake Finn, his voice, his eyes, the way he'd made me feel like I could let go of the guilt that had defined me. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who sang in bars and dreamed of stages, who believed she could outrun her mistakes. She was still there, somewhere, buried under years of motels and men, under the weight of choices I couldn't take back. Finn had seen her, somehow, and now he was asking me to forgive her. I stopped at a motel called the Final Star, just inside California. The neon sign was faint, its letters half burned out, casting a soft blue light over the parking lot. I sat in my room, the papers on the nightstand, the lamp's light warm and golden, like a memory. The air smelled of dust and salt, the ocean close now, its rhythm a steady pulse in the distance. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling toward the ceiling, and stared at the papers, my heart pounding. I picked up the second paper, the one he'd given me at the dusty trail. It was small, folded tightly, the edges worn from being carried too long. I unfolded it, my hands shaking, and found a short note, the handwriting steady but hurried, like he'd written it in a moment of desperation. Sadie. My name's Finn, but there's more to it than that. I've been running from a life I broke, from people I hurt. I saw you in room 9, and for the first time in years, I wanted to stop. You're not just a light in the dark, you're the kind of light that makes a man believe he can forgive himself. I don't know if I can, but I need you to know you made me want to try. The other note is the rest of it. It's not just my story, it's a chance for you to let go. But it's up to you. Finn. I read it again, my eyes burning, my chest tight. Finn. He'd seen me, really seen me, in a way no one else ever had. I set the note down and reached for the first one, the one from that night at the Lone Star Haven. It felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of both our lives. I opened it, my breath catching, and found a single sentence inside. Find me at the end of the line, Sadie. I'll be waiting where the road meets the sea. Below it was an address, a pier in a town called Ocean's End, just a few hours away, and a small sketch of a star, rough but deliberate. I stared at it, my mind spinning. He was asking me to follow him, to let go of the guilt I'd carried, to believe I could be more than my mistakes. I thought about the road, the motels, the nights that had shaped me. I thought about my father, how he'd told me to be careful, and how I'd failed him by leaving. And I thought about Finn, his quiet strength, the way he'd made me believe I could forgive myself. I packed my bag that night, the notes tucked safely in my purse. The Ford's engine roared to life, and I drove west, the desert giving way to the ocean's salt and spray. The road felt different now, like it was leading me somewhere instead of just away. I thought about Finn every mile, his face sharper in my mind than the neon signs fading behind me. I thought about the life I was leaving, the weight of it falling away with every mile. Ocean's End was a quiet town, the kind of place where the ocean sang louder than the people. The address led me to a pier, weathered and gray, stretching out over the water like a hand reaching for something lost. I parked the Ford and walked to the end, the wind cold against my skin, the waves crashing below. I waited, my heart pounding, expecting to see him. But he wasn't there. Instead, I found a small wooden box, tucked against a post, with my name carved into it. Inside was a single seashell, smooth and white, and a note in his handwriting, "You don't need me to let go." I stood there, the shell and the note in my hands, the ocean stretching out before me, endless and unforgiving. I realized then that he wasn't coming, that he'd never been coming. Maybe he was still running, from the guilt he'd carried, from the life he'd broken. Maybe he was a memory, a mirror showing me the forgiveness I needed to give myself. But as the sun sank into the sea, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash, I felt something settle inside me. I'd come here for him, but I was here for me, to let go of the guilt that had held me back. I didn't let the notes go this time. I kept them, along with the shell, tucking them into my purse as I walked back to the Ford. I didn't stay at Ocean's End. I drove on, not knowing where, but carrying that forgiveness with me. The road had brought me to him, and he had shown me how to let go. And maybe that was enough,